The winter in the valley always came quietly. Snow fell like soft white dust, settling over the ground, the trees, and the frozen ponds spread across the land. The cold made the whole place silent, almost like the world was holding its breath. Far from the towns, the valley felt empty, peaceful, and untouched. But on this winter day, something unexpected happened, something no human or animal had seen before. Small alien baby dragon wandered at the edge of the valley. It was no bigger than a young calf, with bright eyes and scales that shimmered gently even under the cloudy sky. It had been following faint trails left by its brood, but the snow had covered most of those traces. Alone and confused, the tiny creature moved slowly, trying to make sense of the strange land it had entered. The baby dragon's steps were shaky. It had been searching for food and warmth for hours, maybe even longer. Its body trembled under the cold wind. It was not used to such freezing weather. Its kind lived in warm mountains far from this icy region. But during a sudden storm, the little one had been separated from the rest of its group. Since then, it had wandered without direction, hoping to find them again. The valley was quiet, and the dragon's soft cries echoed between the trees. It paused now and then, listening, waiting to hear a call from its mother or siblings. But the only sound was the wind brushing through branches. Still, the little creature did not stop. It kept walking, its small claws crunching against the thin layer of snow that covered the ground. Eventually, it came upon a wide frozen pond. The surface looked like solid glass, thick and white, reflecting the dull winter sky. The baby dragon lowered its head and sniffed the ice, curious. It leaned forward, hoping it might find something beneath it, maybe a glimpse of water, maybe just out of instinct. The creature was hungry, tired, and cold. It did not notice how thin the ice was at the edges. It took a step, then another, too trusting, too innocent to sense danger. The moment it placed more weight forward, the ice cracked sharply. The dragon froze in place, its eyes widening. A quick tremble passed under its feet. Before it could shift back, the surface split with a sharp, echoing sound. The dragon slipped, its claws scraping helplessly. The ice gave way, dropping the small creature into freezing water with a splash that scattered pieces of ice in every direction. The water was painfully cold, shocking its tiny body. The dragon gasped and tried to flap its wings, but they were too wet and weak to lift it. It attempted to claw at the edges of the broken ice, but every time it pulled up, the ice crumbled again. The creature let out small cries, filled with fear and confusion. It had never known such cold. It had never faced anything like this. The pond was deeper than it looked. The baby dragon managed to keep its head above the water, but only barely. Its small legs kicked underneath, trying to paddle, trying to survive. Its body shook violently, and each breath came out as a weak puff of fog in the cold air. The creature tried to cling to the broken ice pieces floating around it. Nothing held. Everything was slippery and hard to grip. Hours passed like this. The little dragon fought to stay, afloat as the wind blew across the pond. The cold seeped into its bones, making its movements slower and weaker. Its cries grew quieter. Snow fell softly on its head and wings, adding to the weight it already struggled against. The sky dimmed as the day turned into evening, but there was still no sign of its brood. No footsteps, no familiar calls, nothing dot by the time the night settled in. The dragon was too exhausted to move much. It rested its chin on a solid piece of ice, its eyes half closed. It was shivering nonstop. The only warmth it felt came from its own weak breath. Stars appeared above, twinkling faintly, but they offered no comfort, no help. The next morning was even colder. Frost formed on the edges of the baby dragon's wings. Its body had sunk lower in the water because it no longer had the strength to hold itself up. The little creature's cries were barely whispers now. Still, it did not give up completely. Some small part of it hoped its family might find it. But the valley remained empty. No other creature wandered close. The snow began to fall once again, gently covering the frozen surface around the trapped dragon. 3 long days passed like this. The dragon's energy faded. Its eyes would close for minutes at a time before opening again. It wasn't sleeping. It was simply too tired, too cold, too weak. The ice around it grew thicker as the nights passed, and soon the water shifted from liquid to slush. The dragon's tiny body became partly lodged in place, unable to move freely. It had stopped trying to pull itself out. It had stopped kicking. All it could do was breathe slowly and hope the cold wouldn't take away what little strength it had left. The valley was quiet, completely silent except for the soft wind. The dragon looked almost like a still shape frozen into the pond. If someone had walked past without looking closely, they might have mistaken it for nothing more than ice and snow. But far away, beyond the small hills and clusters of bare trees, a human cowboy was beginning his day. He lived alone on a ranch at the edge of the valley, caring for his animals and watching over the land. Winter meant extra work checking fences, making sure no livestock wandered off, and ensuring everything stayed safe in the cold. On this morning, he woke early as usual, bundled himself up in warm clothes, and stepped out into the crisp air. He didn't know that something strange was waiting for him near the pond. He didn't know that a small life was hanging on by just a thread, hoping anyone would hear it. But fate had a way of guiding footsteps, even across silent snow. The cowboy mounted his horse and began his slow ride along the ranch perimeter. The ground crunched under the horse's hooves, and the air around him fogged with each breath. He didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. He was simply doing his daily routine, riding from one part of the ranch to another. But halfway through the ride, he paused. Something faint reached his ears. At first, he thought it was the wind adjusting its direction. He tilted his head slightly, listening. There it was again, a tiny trembling sound carried by the cold air. It was so soft that he almost missed it. The sound wasn't like any animal he knew. It wasn't the cry of a calf, or the call of a bird, or the whine of a dog. It was weaker, sadder, almost like something calling for help. The cowboy frowned and guided his horse toward the noise. He listened carefully with each step. The closer he got to the pond area, the clearer the sound became. It wasn't steady. It came in faint bursts, almost as if whatever was making it was too tired to call loudly. He reached the pond and dismounted, stepping carefully toward the icy edge. The wind blew across the frozen surface, lifting small flakes of snow. At first, he saw nothing. Then he walked a little closer, and finally, he saw something small, trapped partly in the ice, barely moving. His eyes widened. It didn't look like any creature he had ever seen on Earth. Yet it wasn't frightening. It simply looked helpless, fragile, lost. The baby dragon lifted its head weakly when it sensed movement nearby. Its eyes met the cowboy's for just a moment before it lowered its head again, too tired to hold it up. Its breathing was slow and shallow, and frost clung to its small scales. The cowboy stepped closer, his breath catching slightly. He didn't know what this creature was, or where it came from. But he knew one thing. It needed help, and fast. He looked around the empty valley, and then back at the dragon. No one else was here. No one else would come. For the first time in days, the baby dragon felt a tiny flicker of warmth, not from the weather, but from hope. A human had found it. Someone had finally heard its cries. Someone had come to save it. The cowboy stood at the edge of the frozen pond, staring at the small creature trapped in the ice. The cold wind brushed against his face, but he hardly noticed it. All he could see was the little dragon, shivering and barely moving. The creature's scales were dull, covered with frost, and its small wings hung weakly at its sides. It looked like it had been fighting for life for far too long. He slowly stepped closer, his boots crunching softly on the snow. The dragon raised its head just a little, its eyes half open, as if it was trying to understand who had come. The cowboy stopped a few feet away, not wanting to startle it. The creature looked frightened, but also exhausted, too tired to even react. The cowboy crouched down and gently spoke in a calm voice. He didn't know if the creature understood him, but his tone was soft, almost like he was talking to a scared foal. He told it everything was okay, that he wasn't going to hurt it. His breath formed a cloud in the frozen air as he kept speaking, hoping the creature would stay calm. The dragon blinked slowly, its head trembling before it rested again on the ice. It didn't try to run or struggle. It simply didn't have the strength left. Seeing that made the cowboy's chest tighten with concern. Whatever this creature was, it was just a baby, and it was suffering. He removed his gloves, tucked them into his coat, and leaned closer to inspect the thin ice around the dragon. The edges were cracked, sharp, and fragile. Every time the creature tried to push itself up, the ice broke more, making things worse. If he wasn't careful, he could fall in too. The cold wind blew again, and he felt a sting on his fingers. But he ignored the cold and studied the pond carefully. He had spent many winters on this land. He knew ice. He knew where it was stable and where it would break. If he stepped wrong, both he and the dragon could slip into the freezing water. He walked back to his horse and reached for a rope tied to the saddle. He also grabbed a small metal tool he used to break frozen water for his animals. With ease in hand, he returned to the pond, moving slowly and planning each step. The dragon watched him with tired eyes, though it no longer lifted its head. It looked like it wanted to trust him, but wasn't sure how. The cowboy gave it a small nod, trying to reassure it, even though he wasn't sure it understood. He carefully lay down on his stomach, spreading his weight across the ice to avoid breaking it further. The cold surface pressed against his chest, and he could feel the chill even through his thick coat. Slowly, inch by inch, he slid closer to the creature. The ice groaned under him, but it held. When he reached the broken area, he gently tapped the ice near the dragon, widening the cracked section so he could pull the creature out safely. Every tap made the dragon flinch a little, but it stayed still. It had given up fighting. Using the metal tool, he broke small pieces at a time, pulling them away carefully so they wouldn't slip back into the water. The dragon's breathing became quicker, as if sensing that something was happening. Maybe it felt hope again. Maybe it just felt scared. The cowboy kept talking softly to it, telling it to hold on. Once the hole was wide enough, he tied a loop with a rope and slowly moved it toward the dragon's body. He didn't want to harm it or tighten the rope too much. He slipped the loop around the creature gently, making sure it avoided the wings and neck. The dragon let out a small, weak sound, but it didn't struggle. The cowboy took a deep breath, held the rope firmly, and began to pull. The dragon's body didn't move at first. It was heavy, soaked, and stuck in the icy edges. The cowboy leaned back, bracing his boots against the ice, and pulled harder. The ice cracked louder under the strain, and for a moment he thought the whole surface might collapse. But it didn't. The baby dragon slowly lifted an inch out of the water. The cowboy pulled again, using all the strength he had. The dragon's claws scraped the edge, and water poured off its body, but it didn't slip back in. Inch by inch, the small creature slid across the ice until finally its chest cleared the water completely. The cowboy didn't stop. He kept pulling until the dragon's entire body was out of the pond. It lay on the ice, shivering uncontrollably, too weak to even lift its head. The cowboy hurried over and unlooped the rope, then gently placed his coat over the dragon. The warm fabric looked huge on the tiny creature, but it was the best he could offer. He lifted the dragon in his arms, expecting it to feel hot like the stories of dragons in old tales, but it was freezing cold, almost like holding a block of ice. The cowboy held it close to his chest as he carefully made his way back to solid ground. The dragon made a soft, low sound, almost like a whimper. The cowboy whispered again, telling it not to worry. He knew the creature didn't belong here, but he couldn't leave it like this. He had seen animals suffer from cold before. He knew how dangerous it was. He reached his horse and gently placed the dragon across the saddle. The creature was too weak to even lift its wings or tail. It simply lay there, wrapped in the cowboy's coat. The cowboy quickly mounted behind it, one arm around the small creature to keep it steady. The ride back to the ranch felt longer than usual. The wind was stronger, and snow began to fall again. The cowboy shielded the dragon as best as he could, keeping his coat tight around it. He could feel the dragon's faint shivers through the fabric. Each shake made him more worried. But the creature never tried to escape. It didn't fight. It stayed curled up, trusting him completely, or maybe it was simply too tired to do anything else. When they reached the ranch, the cowboy didn't waste time. He carried the dragon inside the barn, where it was warmer and sheltered from the wind. The lights inside flickered softly, casting a warm glow over the straw-covered floor. The cowboy gently laid the little creature on a pile of dry hay, then rushed to get blankets, warm water, and a heating lamp. He set the lamp a safe distance away and covered the dragon with blankets. Steam rose slowly from its wet scales as the warmth reached its cold body. The dragon let out a long, weak breath. It didn't move much, but its eyes opened just a bit, watching the cowboy. The cowboy crouched down and spoke softly again. He told the creature it was safe now, that no more cold water would drag it down, that it could rest. The dragon blinked slowly, its breathing still shaky but steadier than before. For the first time, its eyes didn't look frightened. They looked tired, relieved, and maybe a little grateful. The cowboy stayed beside it for a long time, making sure it warmed up properly. He brought a small bowl of water and placed it nearby. The dragon sniffed it, but didn't drink yet. It was too exhausted to do anything but rest. Outside, the snow fell quietly, but inside the barn, a small bit of warmth returned. And for the first time since it fell into the pond, the baby dragon felt safe. Someone had seen it. Someone had heard it. Someone had pulled it from the cold that almost ended its life. The cowboy didn't know why this strange creature had ended up here. He didn't know where it came from or what it needed. But he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let it suffer again. Not while it was under his roof. The baby dragon lay in the warm barn, wrapped in blankets and resting under the glow of the heating lamp. The cowboy kept checking on it, moving quietly so he didn't scare the fragile creature. Each time he leaned in, he saw the small dragon's chest rise and fall, though its breathing was still slow and tired. The cold had taken almost all its strength, and it might take hours, maybe days, before it truly recovered. But at least it was safe now. The cowboy stood beside it and rubbed his hands together to warm them. His cheeks were still red from the freezing wind outside. He had seen all kinds of trouble on his land, from storm damage to animals getting stuck in mud. But he had never seen anything like this little creature. It didn't look dangerous. It didn't look like something from stories meant to scare people. It looked more like a lost, cold baby who desperately needed help. He walked out for a moment and returned with a bucket of warm water. He dipped the soft cloth into it and gently squeezed the water out before using the cloth to wipe the dragon's frost-covered scales. The dragon didn't move much, but it made a tiny sound, almost like a sigh, when the warm cloth touched its chilled skin. The cowboy kept his movements slow and careful, not wanting to frighten it or cause any pain. As he worked, he spoke in a calm, quiet voice. He told the creature he was trying to help, and how lucky it was that he had taken the long route around the ranch that morning. If he had gone the other way, he would never have heard the dragon's soft cries across the valley. The thought made him pause. He looked at the little creature lying before him, and a strange feeling settled into his chest. If he had been even a little later, this small life might not have survived. The dragon's wings twitched slightly as the warmth spread through its body. Its tail, which had been stiff and frozen, curled in just a little. The cowboy smiled faintly at the movement. It was a good sign. The creature wasn't giving up. It was fighting to stay alive. He grabbed another blanket and gently laid it over the dragon's body, tucking it around the sides. The creature was still damp in some places, so he worked slowly, lifting the blanket now and then to check if the scales underneath were warming evenly. Each time he moved the blanket, the dragon's eye opened just a little, noticing him, then closed again. The cowboy didn't know much about dragons, real or not, but he knew enough to understand that this creature had been through something terrible. 3 days in freezing water was something even the strongest animals struggled to survive. But somehow, this little one had held on. It had kept calling, even when its voice was too weak to be heard far. The cowboy crouched down and held out his hand. He didn't touch the dragon yet. He simply waited, letting the creature sense him. After a few long seconds, the dragon moved its nose slightly toward his hand. The gesture was small, but it meant trust or at least curiosity. The cowboy smiled again, a warm, relieved smile. Slowly, he brought his hand closer and gently touched the edge of the dragon's jaw. The creature didn't pull away. It breathed in softly, almost like it was smelling him. Maybe it was trying to understand who he was or why he had helped. Or maybe it simply wanted to know if he was safe to be around. The barn was quiet except for the soft humming of the heating lamp. Outside, the wind howled against the wooden walls, but inside, the air felt calm and warm. The cowboy sat on a small stool beside the dragon and waited. He wasn't leaving its side any time soon. Not until he was sure it was out of danger. Hours passed this way. The dragon slept often, curled slightly under the blankets. Each time it woke, it looked around the barn with slow, confused eyes. It took in the hay bales, the tools hanging on the wall, and the soft lights. The cowboy wondered what the creature must be thinking. It had never seen a barn before. It had probably never seen a human either. Everything was new to it. When the dragon opened its eyes again later in the afternoon, the cowboy brought a shallow bowl of warm water. He placed it in front of the dragon and gently nudged it closer. The creature stared at the bowl as if unsure what to do. Then, slowly, it lowered its head. Its tongue flicked out, touching the water. It took one small sip, then another. The cowboy let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Drinking was another good sign. It meant the creature had enough strength and awareness to react to the world again. He watched as the dragon drank a little more before lifting its head. Water dripped from its tiny chin onto the blanket, but the cowboy didn't mind. The dragon looked at him then, really looked at him. Its eyes weren't full of fear anymore. They held something softer, something like recognition. The cowboy didn't know if the creature understood his words, but it understood his actions. And sometimes, kindness didn't need a shared language. As the afternoon turned to evening, the cowboy brought a small container with soft, warm pieces of food. He wasn't sure what the creature ate, so he kept it simple, nothing sharp, nothing hard, just soft pieces that were easy to chew. He held one piece out. The dragon sniffed it suspiciously at first, but after a moment, it slowly leaned forward and took the piece gently between its small teeth. The cowboy chuckled quietly. "There you go," he whispered, though the dragon couldn't understand. But the soft tone made the dragon's ears twitch. The creature chewed slowly, swallowing with effort. The cowboy waited patiently before offering another piece. After a few more bites, the dragon pushed its nose against the blanket and rested again. It was still tired, but now it had warmth, food, and safety. The cowboy stood up and stretched his back. He was tired too, but he didn't want to leave yet. He knew winter nights could get extremely cold, and he wanted to make sure the dragon stayed warm. He checked the lamp again and adjusted the blankets. Outside, darkness settled fully over the valley. The barn lights cast a gentle glow over the sleeping creature. The cowboy leaned on the railing inside the barn and watched the dragon rest. A strange thought crossed his mind, just a quiet thought he didn't say out loud. Why had this creature wandered so far from its home? Where was its family? Were they out there searching for it? Or had they given up, thinking it was lost forever? He pushed the questions away for the moment. Right now, those answers didn't matter. What mattered was helping the little dragon recover. The cowboy pulled an old chair close to the dragon and sat down. He knew he might fall asleep there, but he didn't mind. He wanted to be near in case the creature woke scared or cold. The dragon shifted slightly in its sleep and made a soft sound, something between a hum and a sigh. The cowboy smiled, watching the tiny movement. For the first time since rescuing the creature, he felt the tension leave his shoulders. Things were still uncertain, but the dragon was alive. It was warm. It was resting. And in that quiet barn, far from the frozen pond where it almost lost its life, the little dragon finally felt safe enough to dream. The cowboy didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let this creature suffer again. Not while it trusted him. Not while it breathed under his roof. The next morning, sunlight poured softly through the gaps in the barn walls, turning the cold dust in the air into golden streaks. The baby dragon stirred under the blankets, blinking its large eyes slowly. The cowboy was already awake, quietly, moving around the barn to check on the animals before tending to the dragon. He had barely slept, keeping one ear attuned to any sound from the small creature in the corner. Its soft breathing reassured him that it had survived the night, but he knew there was still a long way to go. The dragon opened its eyes fully and lifted its head, testing its wings lightly. They were still weak, trembling as it tried to stretch them. The cowboy watched silently, understanding the little dragon needed time. He didn't rush it, didn't make sudden movements. He simply moved closer, holding out a hand as if to offer comfort. The dragon looked at him for a moment, then nuzzled his hand softly, a tiny gesture of trust. The cowboy felt warmth spread through him. After days of fear and struggle, this creature had begun to feel safe. He gathered some soft hay and made a little nest in the corner, giving the dragon a safe space to rest while still being warm. The barn wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, dry, and away from the bitter winter outside. The heating lamp glowed gently above the dragon, and the cowboy made sure it wasn't too close, keeping a careful watch so the warmth didn't harm it. The dragon stretched a bit more, testing its strength, then curled up in the hay, its eyes following the cowboy's every movement. The cowboy went to fetch more food. He returned with small portions of soft, warm meals, carefully prepared so the dragon could eat without effort. He set the bowl down gently and waited. At first, the dragon sniffed the food cautiously. It had been days since it had eaten anything substantial, and its small body still felt weak. Slowly, almost hesitantly, it took a bite. Then another, and another. Each mouthful was small, but the cowboy watched as its strength seemed to return, piece by piece. He didn't rush it, letting the dragon eat at its own pace. The little creature lifted its head once it finished, blinking at him as if to say thank you. As the day wore on, the cowboy realized something important. The dragon wasn't just surviving. It was learning to trust him. Its wings twitched more confidently now, its tail flicked gently, and it began exploring its small corner of the barn. The cowboy stayed nearby, watching carefully. Every movement the dragon made, he studied, making sure it wasn't overexerting itself. The creature would occasionally pause and look at him, almost as if asking for reassurance. The cowboy smiled quietly each time. He had never felt such a bond before, not with a human, and certainly not with something so extraordinary. The afternoon came with warmer sunlight streaming through the barn's open doors. The cowboy decided it was time to let the dragon try a little movement outside the nest. He led it gently to a small, cleared area in the barn, where the hay was spread evenly, giving the dragon a soft surface. At first, the creature hesitated. Its legs trembled slightly as it stepped out. The cowboy crouched nearby, ready to catch it if it stumbled. Slowly, the dragon moved forward, testing each step, feeling the firm ground beneath its claws. Each careful movement brought a flicker of confidence in its eyes. The cowboy couldn't help but laugh softly when the dragon stumbled slightly but caught itself. It reminded him of a young animal learning to walk for the first time. There was something precious about the way it moved, each step a victory after the ordeal of the ice pond. The dragon walked in small circles, pausing to sniff the hay, the barn walls, and the cowboy's boots. It was discovering its surroundings, slowly realizing that this place, this human, might be its new sanctuary. At least for now. As the day continued, the cowboy noticed something remarkable. The dragon began using its wings a little. At first, just tiny flaps that didn't lift it from the ground, but enough to make its movements more graceful. The creature seemed to enjoy the sensation, its eyes brightening as it tested each movement. The cowboy spoke softly to encourage it, praising every attempt. The dragon responded in small ways, flicking its tail, twitching its ears, and occasionally letting out a tiny chirping sound. It was as if it were saying, "I am stronger now. I am safe. I can try again." By late afternoon, the cowboy realized it was time to give the dragon a bit more freedom. He opened the barn doors wider, letting the sunlight flood the space. The cold wind outside didn't reach the inside, thanks to the barn structure, but the warmth from the sun was a perfect gift. The dragon stepped cautiously toward the open doorway, glancing at the cowboy as if seeking permission. He nodded, smiling gently. The creature hesitated for a heartbeat, then slowly stepped out into the sunlight. The dragon froze for a moment, letting the warmth and light sink into its small, tired body. Then it took a careful step, then another, exploring the soft snow around the barn doors. Its claws left tiny prints in the snow, a trail of life in the white expanse. The cowboy stayed close, moving slowly, keeping his presence calm and steady. He didn't want to scare it. He just wanted to let it experience the world outside again, safely. The dragon began to move more confidently as it sniffed the air and tested its wings once more. Small flaps lifted it slightly, enough to hover for a moment before landing gently on the snow. The cowboy clapped softly, and the dragon turned its head toward him, as if sharing the joy of this new skill. It was a small victory, but a huge one after the long struggle in the ice pond. The creature's body was gaining strength, its spirit was returning, and its trust in the human who had saved. It was growing day by day. As evening approached, the cowboy led the dragon back into the barn. The light outside faded, leaving long shadows in the snow. The dragon followed him obediently, curling up again in the hay pile. But now there was a sense of comfort in its posture. It wasn't just surviving. It was starting to relax, to feel at home. The cowboy placed a blanket over it, then settled on a stool nearby. He watched the dragon carefully, noticing every breath, every twitch, every small sign of life returning. He thought about how fragile life could be, how easily it could be lost if no one intervened. The dragon's survival was a reminder of that, how a single act of care and courage could change the course of a life. He didn't know where the dragon had come from, or what adventures awaited it in the future, but he knew that right now, he had made a difference. He had saved it. And that mattered more than anything. The dragon shifted slightly, moving closer to the cowboy's hand. It wasn't asking for food or warmth anymore. It was seeking comfort, the presence of someone it could trust. The cowboy reached out, letting his hand rest gently on its back. The dragon leaned slightly into the touch, a soft sound escaping its throat. It wasn't fear anymore. It was acceptance, perhaps even gratitude. The cowboy smiled quietly, feeling a deep connection forming between them. This bond wasn't built. Overnight, it had been earned through care, patience, and trust, but it was real. The night grew colder outside, but inside the barn, warmth filled the air. The cowboy kept the heating lamp on a safe distance, making sure the dragon stayed cozy. He thought about how strange life could be, how one moment a creature was fighting for its life in an icy pond, and the next it was safe, warm, and slowly learning to trust. He marveled at the resilience of the small dragon, how it had held on despite fear, exhaustion, and cold. Hours passed, and the dragon eventually curled up completely, its breathing steady now, its tiny body relaxed. The cowboy watched until he was sure it was asleep, then leaned back on his stool, exhausted but satisfied. He had done everything he could for now. The dragon had survived. It had eaten, it had moved, it had begun to heal. And in return, it had offered him something unexpected, a silent bond that felt stronger than words, stronger than any ordinary friendship. Before leaving the barn for a short break, the cowboy gave the dragon one last gentle pat. The creature shifted slightly in response, but didn't wake fully. It had learned that this human wasn't just a stranger. He was someone it could rely on, someone who had saved it. And perhaps, in its own quiet way, the dragon was learning to trust, again learning that there could be safety, warmth, and kindness in this strange new world. Outside, the valley lay quiet under the first stars of the night. The wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying the faint smell of snow and earth. Inside the barn, a tiny life rested safely, wrapped in warmth and comfort, recovering from an ordeal that had tested it to the limit. And beside it, a human watched quietly, ready to do whatever it took to help this extraordinary creature heal, grow, and thrive. In that moment, it wasn't just about survival. It was about connection, about trust, and about the small miracles that could happen when one life reached out to save another. The valley was quiet that morning. Snow covered the fields, glistening under the pale winter sun. The barn smelled of hay, warmth, and faint traces of the small dragon's scales. Inside, the baby dragon stirred, lifting its head and blinking slowly. Its wings twitched, and its tail flicked gently across the straw, showing more strength than before. The cowboy had been awake for hours, watching carefully, ready to help if needed. But now, he realized something extraordinary. The little dragon was ready to try more than just standing or moving. It was ready to fly again, at least for short moments. He approached slowly, holding out his hand as he had so many times before. The dragon looked at him, and at the open space in the barn where sunlight streamed in. Its eyes flickered with curiosity and caution. The cowboy crouched down, speaking softly. He didn't need to rush anything. The dragon had survived ice, freezing water, and exhaustion. Now it just needed patience and encouragement. The creature rose to its feet, its legs shaky at first, then gradually firmer. It stretched its wings fully for the first time since the rescue. Sunlight caught on the shimmering scales, making the dragon glow slightly in the barn's warm light. The cowboy held his breath. This small movement, this tiny display of strength, felt monumental. It had survived what no one thought it could, and now it was ready to try again. The cowboy guided the dragon toward the open barn door. Outside, the snow was still crisp, soft under the small weight of its claws. The dragon hesitated at first, peering at the wide world beyond. The wind was cold, but sunlight warmed the snow in patches. The dragon's wings twitched, lifting it slightly off the ground in a short flutter. It stumbled back on its claws, then tried again. Each attempt grew stronger, more controlled. The cowboy stayed close, encouraging it with gentle words. Careful not to frighten it. After several careful attempts, the dragon managed a few small hops in the sunlight, its wings spreading wide, lifting it briefly before landing softly on the snow. It made a quiet sound, a mix of surprise and joy. The cowboy clapped gently, smiling. The creature looked back at him, eyes bright and alert, as if sharing this small victory. It was no longer the fragile, frightened creature from the ice pond. It was beginning to regain its confidence, its life returning step by step. The morning passed slowly, the cowboy remaining near the dragon as it explored the area around the barn. The creature tested its wings, hopped over small piles of snow, and even tried to chase the wind as it swept across the field. Its movements were careful but determined. The cowboy could see how much it was learning, how much it had recovered. Every flap of its wings, every twitch of its tail was a sign of strength returning. The bond between them had grown in ways neither could fully explain. The dragon trusted him completely, and the cowboy, in turn, felt a sense of responsibility deeper than he had ever known. By afternoon, the sky darkened slightly with clouds rolling in from the mountains. The cowboy watched the dragon carefully as it continued to practice its flapping and hopping. He thought about how far it had come from being trapped in the ice pond for days, nearly frozen to death, to now moving and testing its own abilities again. The creature's resilience amazed him. He realized that sometimes life's most remarkable lessons came from the smallest, most unexpected creatures. Just as the first light snowflakes began to fall, the dragon lifted its wings fully and launched itself into the air. It hovered briefly, wobbling slightly, and landed gracefully on the soft snow. Its eyes sparkled with pride and excitement. The cowboy laughed quietly, feeling a mix of relief and joy. This small, incredible life that he had saved had not only survived, it had begun to thrive. Later that evening, a distant sound reached the valley. The cowboy froze, listening carefully. It was faint at first, a series of soft calls carried on the wind. The dragon lifted its head, ears twitching, eyes alert. Its body tensed, and it let out a small chirping sound in response. The cowboy watched, recognizing the pattern. These weren't ordinary animal sounds. The dragon was responding to someone. Then, slowly, the rest of the brood appeared on the distant ridge, gliding gracefully over the snow-covered hills, their scales glinting faintly in the fading light. The dragon's reaction was immediate. It ran toward the barn door, then leapt into the air with powerful flaps of its wings, circling the area with joy. Its cries were loud and clear, calling to its family. The cowboy stood back, giving it space. He could feel the emotions in the air, the reunion that was about to happen. The dragon had survived the worst, and now it was about to return to the ones it belonged to. One by one, the other dragons descended, landing carefully on the snow near the barn. The baby dragon ran toward them, stopping occasionally to glance back at the cowboy, its eyes reflecting both gratitude and attachment. The reunion was touching. The small creature nuzzled its siblings, chirped softly, and eventually settled among them. Its family examined it with curiosity and relief, their movements graceful and cautious. The cowboy watched silently, a sense of awe and pride swelling in him. He had saved this life, and now he was witnessing its return to its family. The baby dragon paused one last time, looking back at the cowboy. Its eyes met his, and it let out a soft, gentle sound. It wasn't a word, but it was a gesture of thanks, a promise that it would remember. The cowboy felt a lump in his throat. He nodded gently, understanding perfectly. Sometimes words weren't necessary. Trust, care, and courage spoke louder than anything else, as the dragons took flight together, gliding over the snowy fields and disappearing toward the mountains. The baby dragon remained close to the cowboy for a few moments longer. Then, with a final small flap, it joined its family. The sound of wings beating and the shimmer of scales against the fading light filled the valley. A beautiful reminder of survival, resilience, and connection. The cowboy stood alone in the barn, watching the space where the dragons had been. The cold wind carried the faint echoes of their calls, now fading into the distance. He felt a mixture of emotions: joy, pride, and a gentle sadness. The baby dragon had returned to its family, but a part of him knew that bond they had formed would last, even across distance and time. He had seen something extraordinary, something that reminded him how fragile and precious life could be, and how a single act of kindness could make a world of difference. He walked back into the barn, brushing snow from his coat. The warmth from the dragon still lingered in the air, along with the soft traces of hay and feathers from its wings. He thought about the events of the past days, the ice pond, the struggle, the rescue, the slow recovery, and the final reunion. It all seemed incredible, almost like a dream. But it had happened, and he had been a part of it. A human had saved an extraordinary creature, and in doing so, he had witnessed the strength and spirit of life itself, as night fell over the valley. The cowboy lit a small lantern in the barn, its soft glow illuminating the empty space where the dragon had rested. He sat on a stool, taking a moment to reflect on the journey. The world outside was quiet, cold, and vast, but inside he had felt warmth, trust, and the quiet joy of having helped a life survive. He knew that tomorrow would bring routine, chores, and the quiet rhythm of ranch life, but tonight he allowed himself to simply sit and remember the miracle of the little dragon who had almost been lost, and the bond they had shared. The valley slept under the stars, and far above, the dragons flew together, their silhouettes blending with the night sky. The baby dragon had found its family again, but it carried with it the memory of the human who had saved it. The cowboy, in turn, carried the memory of a small life that had trusted him completely. A reminder that courage, patience, and kindness could change the course of even the most fragile existence. In that quiet moment, both human and dragon had learned something important. Survival was not just about strength, but about care, trust, and the bonds formed along the way. And in that lesson, there was a quiet magic that would remain long after the dragons had gone, leaving the valley peaceful once more.